Liliana, today's
Something I can
all
help
about
with?
you. Something.
Yes? What's on your mind?
Things. You were traveling minstrel. No, I don't want any tales. Do you miss anything about LA?
I miss Valroyaux. Unlike other cities where the people are the lifeblood and the character, Valroyaux was her own person, and her people little more than decorations. There was always music in Valroyaux, streaming from the many windows, quiet refrains and triumphant choruses, and always, floating above that all, the chant, coming from the Grand Cathedral. It was magnificent.
Sounds interesting. I've never been to LA.
If you get the chance, you should see it, at least Valroyaux. Of course there are good things and bad things about Orlais, like anywhere else. Sometimes I miss it dearly, and sometimes I'm glad I'm rid of it. And you will laugh at this, but I miss the fine things I had in Orlais.
What sort of things?
Dresses, fine dresses and furs. And shoes, of course. One can't mingle with nobility with bad shoes, you see. Orlais is very fashionable. Almost ridiculously so. But the shoes... Living with those ridiculous trends was worth it for the shoes.
What's so special about shoes?
Well, they're shoes. They're pretty. Some of them anyway. When I left Orlais, the fashion was shoes with delicate tapered heels and embellishments in the front. A ribbon, perhaps, or embroidery. In soft colors, of course. It was spring.
Okay, that sounds lovely.
I had my eye on a pair my shoemaker was working on. It was covered in pale blue silk, with amber beads on the toe. The shoes made in Orlais were exquisite. Not at all like these clunky fur-lined leather boots you have in Ferelden. Ugh, just look at them.
They're comfortable.
They're sturdy shoes, but sometimes a girl just wants to have pretty feet. Oh, I could talk about shoes all day, but we have things to do, don't we?
Yeah, don't you want to talk about your past too? Shale, actually, I forgot you existed.
I've watched a lot of humans in my time. It should be aware that I've decided that it is not much like any of them.
That's probably because I'm an elf.
Oh, it's not just that. Well, I'm sure that's part of it, but it's not only that. Surely it must come from some superior lineage, yes? Some breed of flesh creature that has decided to elevate its genetic stock above its natural shortcomings?
Well, I'm a mage, so that obviously puts me above everyone else, and also a very superiorly bred elf.
Then that
Or
must be
person.
it. The humans have always spoken about elves being inferior, but obviously this is their own stupidity talking.
Yes!
I would appreciate if it didn't spread around that I said anything. Humans might start to get the wrong idea. They might start thinking their race is not completely hopeless.
Ah, and we wouldn't want that.
Indeed. Can it imagine the horror? Oh. Now, let us crush something into a fine paste before it starts to think I've gone all soft. Perish the thought. It speaks.
Hey, it speaks. You ask some questions.
It doesn't have better things to do.
No, not right now. I'm told you killed your former master.
Oh, how interesting. Certainly I remember having a master. My memories of what happened to him are vague.
Vague, but not non-existent.
Clever and true. Oh, very well. Let me see what I can recall. My former master enjoyed experimenting upon me. I remember that much. There was tinkering with spells, and then the crystals. He was very eager to alter my function, I think.
What sort of experiments?
Bah! I am no mage, and he did not explain himself to me, any more than it would explain itself to a sword. He possessed my control rod, and back then, it would have prevented me from doing anything he did not command me to, no matter how I might have wished to. So what happened? I am unsure. He was experimenting, and then... nothing.
Are you sure nothing at all? So he hit the kill me button by accident?
Oh, ho, ho. It does like to laugh, does it? But who knows? I may have such a thing. And then he was gone. I was standing where I was, in the village, and I could no longer move. The villagers came, poked and prodded me in fear, and then realized they could neither move me nor destroy me, so they simply left me. And in time I forgot I hadn't stood there all along.
That sounds like crap.
In fact, at first I found it more of a relief. For so many years I'd had to leap to that little toadstool's every command. Get this, pick up that, put it down, pick it up again. The gall! At first I'd hoped he'd simply decided to leave me there paralyzed, an acceptable trade-off. After years passed, I simply stopped caring.
Sounds like you had a good rest.
I think I was ready to move on. Another few years and the moss would have covered my face, and then where would I have been? Whatever the mage did seemed to render the control rod useless, for which I should be thankful, yes? And provided it doesn't decide to copy his experiments, not that I would allow it, it is nothing to fear from me. Much.
Sounds good to me.
The things that it fights, and it fights things often, that is a different story. Let us get back to the walking and the fighting. My stone is beginning to itch again.
No, I actually wanna
It
talk more to
speaks.
you. Yeah, questions.
It doesn't have better things to do.
No, I still don't. How did you end up in Honeyleaf, do you remember?
Oh yes, that I remember quite well. My former master, the mage Wilhelm, he brought me. As I recall, he had acquired some position with whatever lord ruled the land. I, being little more than a glorified possession at the time, was brought along. Oh, how he enjoyed impressing the villagers with me. Gollum snarl at that villager there, be fearsome. And of course, I would have to do it.
I would have thought you'd enjoy scaring humans.
I'd have happily stomped them all into paste, and then ripped down their little houses and stomped on them, too. In fact, after 30 years of watching them, I'd do it twice. What I didn't like was being ordered to do it. Dangled in front of those frightened morons like some scary thing. Once I was a statue, it took those villagers years before they'd even approach me. The first one to actually work up the nerve to touch me urinated himself. Ugh.
That's gross. You didn't like this Wilhelm, I take it?
He did love using that control rod. Fondled it so much his wife actually threatened to throw it in the lake. Ha! I would have liked to have seen that. Which reminds me, where did it find the rod? Did it pay a great deal for it?
Not really. Wilhelm's wife sold it, I believe.
Hag.
But do you remember anything before Honeyleaf?
I traveled with the mage. He did a lot of traveling, I remember that. But where we went, it is rather fuzzy. I remember great battles, fighting many humans long ago. They were all very soft and squishy. And before that, No, there are only images. I was somewhere dark.
So how old are you exactly?
I have no idea. Wilhelm used to brag that the dwarves stopped making golems centuries ago. I do not age as you soft creatures do. Sadly, my memory is no better. Plus, I get bored and stop paying attention.
But were you out in front of the tower? Where were you?
That is where Wilhelm kept me. He wanted me out in the open where I could be frightening like a scarecrow. I was supposed to watch for thieves. Pah! Plus, his wife didn't want me indoors. She said there wasn't room for me. Hag.
His wife?
I was once larger, 10 feet tall. Then the loathsome hag complained that I couldn't fit through the doors. So the mage had me shrunk down. Can it believe it? And she still wanted me out.
How does someone shrink a golem?
With a chisel. And a lot of nerve.
Oh my god. Interesting. I think I'm done.
Good. I was just about done talking about it. It does like to have a good chat now and again, doesn't it?
Yeah. Let's have a chat with Morrigan.
Tis a curious thing. I do not know how else to describe it.
What? You look confused.
Indeed I am, a little. I am reminded of our first meeting in the wilds. I had been in animal form for some time, watching your progress. I was intrigued to see such a formidable woman, obviously more potent than the men she traveled with. Yet I resented it when Flemeth assigned me to travel with you. I assumed that, at best, you would drive me from your company as soon as we left the wilds.
Why would I do that?
I am aware that I have little talent for forming friendships, to put it lightly. 'Tis something I know nothing of, nor ever thought I needed. Yet when I discovered Flemeth's plans, you did not abandon me. Whatever your reasons, you fought what must have been a terrible battle without hope of real reward.
Well, I kind of just keep you around so that I don't have to die in the end. It because I'm your friend.
And that is what I do not understand. Of all the things I could have imagined would have resulted when Flemeth told me to go with you, the very last would have been that I would find in you a friend, perhaps even a sister. I want you to know that while I may not always prove worthy of your friendship, I will always value it. But enough of such idle talk. There are more useful things to be done, surely.
Yeah, wanna hug a little? Hey you.
What say you?
Questions?
By all means.
What's your opinion of the Dalish?
I know little enough of the Dalish other than the fact that my mother was one, or so I was told. She had fallen in love with an elven woodcutter and accompanied him back to the city, leaving her clan behind for good. And there, of course, the woodcutter died of some filthy disease and my mother was forced into prostitution to pay off his debts. Oldest tale in the book.
What was the woodcutter your father?
How should I know? My mother was a whore, as you'll recall. None of the other elven boys in the whorehouse knew their fathers. I was not so unusual. I didn't know my mother either, of course. She died giving birth to me. My first victim, as it were. We were all raised communally by the whores. It was a happy enough existence, ignoring the occasional beating. Until eventually I was sold to the crows. I brought a good price, so I hear.
You're oddly cheerful about all that.
It could have been much worse. Shall I tell you about what happened to the other whorehouse boys who did not fetch a decent price with the crows? Surely your life has not been so idyllic. People like you and I are not the product of happy lives of contentment, after all.
Oh no, I was tortured in the circle, it was horrible. Yeah.
My original point is that my mother's Dalish nature was always a point of fascination for me. Through all the years of my crow training, the one thing of my mother's that I possessed was a pair of gloves. They were of Dalish make, I knew that much, and beautiful. I had to keep them hidden, of course, as we were not allowed such things. Eventually, they were discovered, and I never saw them again.
But how do you feel about the Dalish in general?
I don't feel anything about them. Oh, we heard about them in the city, even deep in Antiva. I even had the notion once to run off and join them. Naturally, the reality did not live up at all to the fantasies I had constructed as a boy, staring at those gloves. But such is life. Come, enough talk of the Dalish. Let us move on.
Yes.